Discovering Insert Wine Here. We love making new discoveries about wines, so we thought we would share some of that with you. We will be rolling out a new subscription series called Discovering Insert Wine Here. Each month, we will choose a wine to discuss and pair and do a live Zoom with our subscribers. Now, when I say wine, we will keep this simple, but it will be something that you can find locally or order. During our Zoom, you will learn about the wine, the style, and the region. Then we will taste, pair, and share our thoughts. I'll finish with the recipe to show you how simple making the dish can be. If you can't join us live, we will share the recording so you can watch it later. Discovering Insert Wine Here.
So we're talking about Chardonnay today. International Chardonnay Day is May 22nd, so we're getting a jump start on that. Chardonnay, we're going to discuss the nature of this grape, which is described as non-aromatic. We'll talk about the origins and the places that this popular grape has traveled from: France, Chardonnay and Bourgogne, which we will call it Bourgogne tonight because those people in Burgundy don't like it to be called Burgundy. They like Bourgogne. So we're going French style here tonight. So this is a picture of the Côte de Beaune. It's the region where Chardonnay grows, primarily in Bourgogne. We'll also talk about Chablis, which is a region that is much further north, and they grow just Chardonnay there. We'll talk about all the places across the globe where Chardonnay grows because it's super popular. I think it's the 10th most planted grape on the planet. So we'll talk about all of those places. We'll talk about the different styles and the different ways that winemakers make this wine, which with those stainless steel wines, you often get crisp and clean wines that have lemon to them, a lot of lemon and citrus. And then there's also the style where they do malolactic fermentation and do it in oak, and you'll get lots of butter and richness out of the wine. So different styles that way. We'll talk about grazing boards and different things you can pair with Chardonnay, and we'll go through some of our favorite pairings for Chardonnay. Along the way, we'll talk about what's in each of our glasses because we probably have Chardonnays from all kinds of different places. And then we'll share what we've got on our grazing boards. So if you haven't already opened your wine, you have wine to sip, go ahead and open it. If you've got something that you're going to munch on, go ahead and get that ready and start sipping and munching while I chat here. So I mentioned that Chardonnay is a non-aromatic grape. It has low levels of what they call terpenes. So terpenes are the aromatics that you get out of foods. In fact, you hear them talked about quite a bit when they're talking about marijuana and things, the flavor, the odors and fragrances behind those. But they're also in most things that we smell that have volatile aromatics. Chardonnay has a low levels of terpenes as opposed to Riesling that we talked about recently that has high levels of terpenes. This is a grape that buds early. And while that seems like it might be a great thing, the problem is that it often buds early and there are late frosts, especially with global changes in the climate. We find that often late frosts will come in. This is a picture, beautiful as it is. It's kind of one of those tragic pictures. This was a 2016 frost event in Chablis, where late in the season, after the vines had already budded out, they had a cold front come through and they were worried about frost. So they light all these candles. They call them candles. They're really big buckets filled with wax and paraffin and a wick in them that light up and help to heat the vineyard to keep the frost from settling there. So we mentioned Bourgogne. When you're looking here at the map, you'll see Bourgogne, or you'll see Bourgogne down the side there in pink. But actually, they also have been Chardonnay has been found in the Val de Loire, the Loire Valley. So you'll find it there also. In Bourgogne, you see the Bourgogne here, the top part where it says Côte de Nuit and Côte de Beaune, that's what they consider the Côte d'Or, which is the golden coast there. And then there's Chablis, which we'll talk about later, the Côte Chalonnais and the Mâconnais below that. Also, you'll find some Chardonnay grown. This is the Chablis region, and it's a region that they only allow Chardonnay to be grown. That's the only recognized grape in the area. And there's several different, you can see the color coding there for the several different levels of Chardonnay. So Petit Chablis is the lowest level, then Chablis, then you have the Chablis Premier Cru, and finally the Chablis Grand Cru. And you can see the Grand Cru is just one little area there. It is one single slope within the vineyards in Chablis. The region is also known for its soils, and it has what they call Kimmeridgian marl. And it's a white clay type of soil. You can see actually like fossils of shells in it here. And there's a strip of this that goes all the way out to the coast. In fact, it's the same soils that make up the White Cliffs of Dover. It's really good for bringing minerality into the wines. And you find that a lot of the wines from Chablis are really good with oysters. I mean, you can see this used to be a seabed. They're kind of landlocked now, but you get those mineral notes that come through the wines. As we said, we've got Bourgogne here. Further north, you get the Champagne region. That's another region where they grow a lot of Chardonnay. It's further north. You can see the Côte de Blancs there. Obviously, Côte de Blancs, it's white. So this is where they grow a lot of Chardonnay within that region to make sparkling wines. So Chardonnay dominates the southern part of the Côte d'Or, the Côte de Beaune, this is one of the vineyards there, the Pommard wine region. And even further south, again, you can see the Mâconnais, which is much further south than the Côte de Beaune, where they grow it in Pouilly-Fuissé. You can see Pouilly way down at the bottom of the Mâconnais there. In California, of course, they have it growing in Napa Valley. And if any of you have watched the movie Bottle Shock, you'll be familiar with the famous Chardonnay that came out of Chateau Montelena in the 1976 Judgment of Paris. Do you guys know the story of the Judgment of Paris? Then I won't go into all of that because we're all familiar with that. But it's kind of fun. The winemaker that made that wine there was actually Mike Grgich, who founded Grgich Hills. That's also in the Napa Valley. He passed away just a couple of years ago, but his son still runs the winery. And Mike was actually a Croatian immigrant when he came to this country to make wine. So you'll find also places like Oregon and Washington and Santa Rita Hills that are really places that have really, really delicious Chardonnay wines. Santa Rita Hills, if you guys ever have a chance to go to Brewer Clifton and in Santa Barbara, it's a fabulous winery and they make a delicious Chardonnay. On the other side of the globe, Scarborough Vineyard is in the Hunter Valley. And I think I showed this picture when we were talking about Shiraz the other day. They grow some Shiraz here, but their focus in this vineyard is Chardonnay, which is something that's kind of odd within the Hunter Valley. But they do, we did a tasting with them of probably something like 10 different Chardonnays that they grow there. So they're making some spectacular Chardonnay there. There's also another place a little further inland in the Orange region of New South Wales where Philip Shaw is making some spectacular Chardonnays also. Around the world, you find them in Argentina. Just did a tasting not too long ago with the coastal wines of Chile that included both Chardonnays and Pinot Noirs. And then we did a tasting of Cadgal, which is in the Piemonte region. So let's go over what we've got in our glasses and share what we're drinking since they're a little bit from everywhere. All right, let's move on to the flavors in the glass. So we've labeled Chardonnay. Oh,
sorry, Robin, really quick before
yeah.
I forget. Can you remind me what Grand Cru is and Premier Cru and the differences between those?
So Grand Cru is very specifically one slope. You saw that map before. That map breaks down the areas within Chablis that can label their wines as Grand Cru. And it has a lot to do with in Burgundy also. It's the same way for the Grand Crus with Chardonnay and with Pinot Noir. It's where they're located on the slope because the top of the slope is going to get extra wind and it's also going to get more water coming down from the top. When you get down into the bottom, then you've got richer soils. And we all know grapes like to struggle a little bit. So those richer soils make less expressive wines. So the middle part of the slope is where most of the Grand Crus end up being. So it's kind of like, it's set out as this is the area that is considered a Grand Cru. So the Grand Cru vineyard is that one slope in Chablis, and then there are other Premier Cru vineyards that are around there that are set up, and then there's places that are only allowed to call it Chablis, and then they've got Petit Chablis, which tends to be I don't know. I tend to find Petit Chablis to be brighter. Typically they're not going to spend as much time putting them into oak or to aging them, so they're going to be brighter and fresher. Typically, we'll say.
Yeah. Gotcha. So it's allocation based on location, basically
Yes.
naming it based off the location and what type of what it produces. Okay.
Yes.
Got it.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Sure. So we mentioned that it's a non-aromatic grape, which I always thought was kind of a diss on Chardonnay. Poor Chardonnay. It doesn't have terpenes. It can't help it. But this does leave a canvas open for other things, like the type of soils and the influence that a soil can have on it, and then the influence of the winemaker themselves and what they want to do with it. So one of the first things that we'll talk about is the buttery notes and how they get there. So movie theater popcorn with butter on it might smell like, you know, one of those big buttery Chardonnays, and there's a very specific reason for that. The process that gives you that aroma is called malolactic fermentation. So you have regular fermentation, the yeast eating the sugars, and then there's malolactic fermentation, and this is bacteria that changes the malic acid, which is kind of like an unripe green apple, into lactic acid, like you would get with milk, right? So you're taking this crisp, really super tart acid and turning it into something that's much rounder. And that's where you get those butter and cream notes. And the byproduct of this malolactic fermentation is diacetyl. It's a compound. And it's actually the compound that is movie theater butter that they put on. So when you're smelling that, it's because it's the very same thing. So that's what gives the buttery flavors to these. And malolactic fermentation, actually, most red wines go through that. Very few white wines go through that because of the buttery smells that you get. So you can kind of, it's going to give a richness and a roundness to the palate, and you'll get some of those creamier notes. So other things that you can get that the winemaker can use is oak. The different types of oak and different toasts on the oak can impart flavors to the wine also. So you'll get spicy notes or notes of vanilla or coconut and different levels of toast that will go into the wine. It can also provide some tannins too. I was looking for a picture of batonnage because I wanted to talk about that. Because batonnage is a way, the lees, which are the yeast that are eating all the sugars in the wine, drop to the bottom when they're dead, when they're done. So they're all in the bottom. And there's a thing called batonnage that they use a lot with Chardonnay, which basically is stirring those dead yeast cells. So they stir them up into the wine periodically. And what that does is it adds texture to the wine. So it'll change the body of the wine and change the texture of the wine. So that's another way that the winemaker can influence the Chardonnay. And lastly, of course, they can also use stainless steel. When you're using stainless steel, you have much more control over temperature and control over oxygen exchange. So you end up with crisper, brighter wines, typically that way. So we talked about all these things. Let's talk about how they affect the aromas in the wines. So cool climate Chardonnays are typically going to have notes of lemon and lime, green apple and fennel, pear, lemon zest, lime zest, grapefruit, maybe some grassy notes, Asian pear, and floral notes like citrus blossoms or other white flowers, honeysuckle or orange blossoms. So that's what you're going to get out of cool climate Chardonnay. Moderate climates are going to go more into the stone fruits. So you'll get peach and apricot and nectarine and white peach and maybe some like preserved lemon notes in a moderate climate wine. And when you get into a warm climate Chardonnay, you're going to end up with all those tropical fruits. So you've got pineapple and mango and melons and guava and pineapple and fig, those type of things. We talked about malolactic fermentation, which can give you notes of butter and cream. That lees contact I was talking about with batonnage, or even just if it's sitting just in the bottom of the barrel and allowing it to rest on its lees, that will give you bready or yeasty notes. And then oak imparts some flavors. You've got the toast notes or vanilla, cinnamon, clove, coconut, or baking spices that might be imparted from the oak. As wines age, when there's a little bit of oxygen exchange, they're going to become richer. And you might get notes of nuts or mushrooms, dried fruit, honey, graham cracker crust, which I think is a wonderful thing, caramel and hazelnuts, and baked apple, possibly. And then there are those soil notes that can be added in there depending on the soils. And with Chardonnay, often you have influences that give you chalk or flint, wet sand, which was a descriptor that I heard recently that I thought was really kind of a wonderful descriptor, slate, sea spray, or wet stones. So what are you getting from your wine? And do you smell any of those aromas on the list? And did that tell you anything about your wine? I'm going to bring back up the whole list. It's a lot smaller, sorry, but at least it gives us an idea here.
If you're interested in joining us, email me at robin@42aspens.com and I'll send you the details.